Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing surprisingly good albums. So I'm going to show you some albums in my collection from bands who have put out an album where I really had low expectations, maybe wasn't expecting it to be good, maybe their previous album hadn't been that great, or maybe they just hadn't released anything for a while. Or what's the case with a lot of these? It's well after this sort of peak period of hard rock and hair metal in the 80s and grunge or other types of music much more popular. So this type of music is less popular. So I'm not necessarily expecting them to kind of produce the same kind of music or quality of music maybe that they had done in the past. Maybe they're an older band now, or maybe you're thinking that they're going to start following the musical trends and start going down that road. But instead they put out a really good, solid hard rock album or metal album or whatever type of genre you want to call it. So let's kick it off with some CD. So these albums I've got on CD mainly because you can't actually get them on vinyl. So I'd love to get them on vinyl if I could. So the first surprisingly good album I want to talk about is Arcade. So this is, of course, Stephen Pearcy's band that he formed after Rat disbanded around 91, 92. They split up. And this album actually came out in 1993 on Sony Music. They put two albums out. For me, the first one is the best one. But this is 1993. And this is very much what you would, you could definitely put it in the hair metal category. They have not been influenced at all by the changing musical landscape, grunge, alternative rock, that sort of stuff. This totally fits in with the type of music. It's different, a little bit different to Rat, but it definitely fits in with the type of music that Rat were doing. Stephen on vocals sounds fantastic. There's some great songs on here. Dancing with the Angels, which kicks off the album, is a great track. But my favorite, and there was a music video for this as well, is Nothing to Lose. There's some good ballads on here as well that I like. Cry No More, Screaming SOS is a really kick-ass song as well. Slower songs, Mother's Blues, I actually quite like. That ends the album. So really good album. It didn't do that well, but again, at the time, 1993, bands like this were really struggling to get attention. But like I said, it's on Sony. It was a major label album. It's produced really well. I'd love a vinyl, reissue of this, or for it to be issued on vinyl. Never been put on vinyl. Really good. Now, of course, after that, this is also maybe a bit of a surprise that they got even a second album. I don't know how well exactly this did, but I saw it in Metal Edge magazine a little bit, but it didn't get a lot of promotion. I don't know how much airplay it would have got on MTV, probably very little. But they did surprisingly get a second album, and this was also really good. Now, this one's a little bit different. Maybe the alternative stuff, alternative influences are starting to come in just a little bit on this one, but it's actually quite a heavy record. The first song, Angry, is exactly like the title says, really angry sort of a song. But yeah, just good solid album. It is perhaps getting a little bit sort of alternative at times with some of the songs. I like Room with a View. That's a good song. But yeah, I don't mind this album at all. This is 1994, so about a year later, this comes out. I think this probably did even less well, but it's just called A2. But yeah, really good. Now they also had some other well-known people in this band as well. So they've got the drummer from Cinderella, Fred Curry. He's on drums, and also Frankie Wilczek's, who was in Sea Hags. He is in this band as well. But check it out if you haven't heard it. If you like Rat, you will like this, especially the first album. I'm saying it's surprising because I really wasn't expecting that much. I hadn't actually really been enjoying the last sort of two or three Rat albums. I mean, wouldn't say dislike them greatly, but I felt like since Dancing Undercover, the albums since then hadn't been that great. So, but yeah, this is the best thing. If this was a Rat album, I'd say this is the best Rat album since Dancing Undercover. Of course, it's not. But yeah, it gives Dancing Undercover a run for its money as far as I'm concerned. It could even be a bit better than Dancing Undercover. So, yeah, for 1993, this was a really nice surprise because it was hard to find albums like this around that time. One of the few major label, bands that had a hair metal type sound that was coming out in 1993. So, yeah, definitely a surprise there for me. And yeah, surprisingly enjoyable. All right, another one really took me by surprise. This is a band called Danger Danger, and this is called For the Hard Way. Now, this album was a surprise to me because it's got so many great songs on it. Yet their previous album, I think it was called Screw It. I don't even have it. Well, I do have it on CD, but and yeah, I mean, granted, it's not easy to get on vinyl, but I don't particularly like that album, so that for me was not a great album. Their debut album I quite like, they had the hit song Naughty Naughty. There's some good songs on there. I quite like their first album. So really, it's 1995, I think, when this comes out. I'm not expecting much. I don't even know if I'm really following it at the time. I catch up with this and managed to get a copy of this at some point. And I had actually heard when I bought this that, reading reviews, that actually it was surprisingly good. But yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be as good as what it actually is. Now they've got Paul Lane, I think that's how you say it, on vocals for this album. But Ted Poley has also done vocals for this album as well. I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but maybe I think Ted did the vocals, then he was kicked out of the band, and they got, or we left the band, whatever the situation was, and then they got Paul in and he did the vocals, so it was released with this. But you can actually buy this album with both versions, so both vocalists singing on it, so you can see which one you like. I don't know. I think I have checked it out online. I didn't notice a lot of difference, but the songs are great, really good songs. Especially one of my favourite songs, hard rock songs ever, is Going, Going, Gone. It's just such a great song. I love that one. And yeah, again, it's one of those situations where, in the mid-90s, I'm not expecting to hear, really good hard rock like this. This is really fantastic. They've matured, I think, a little bit. I thought Screw It was a little silly. I mean, yeah, granted, hair metal can be, but I just think they just lyrically they just weren't doing it for me. Not that that's a big deal, but it just got really, really silly, I thought. And yeah, musically they just didn't have the hooks that they had on that first album. But I know some people do like Screw It. I mean, Beat the Bullet from Screw It was a good song. For me that was about it. But so yeah, so often with a lot of these albums I'm going to show, my surprise is the fact that maybe the previous album had been quite disappointing, well, just not that good. And then they're coming out with an album like this. So yeah, worth checking out. Now they've done another album, well, at least one other, maybe even more actually, I think, with Paul Lane. But and this, yeah, Ted Poley, of course, is still going as well as a solo artist, and he's fronting other bands as well. So there's other dangerous type stuff to check out that is worth checking out actually. But yeah, for me, this is their best album, and so quite a nice surprise. It came out on MTM, on the MTM label, around 95. But yeah, really good. So nice surprise. And the last CD I'm going to show that was a surprise is Wasp and Unholy Terror. Now, Wasp putting out a great album is not a surprise to me now, but it was a little bit in 2001. So this came out in 2001, and every single Wasp album I had loved up to Hell Dorado. Hell Dorado, for whatever reason, for me, just doesn't do it for me. And I had sort of thought, okay, they've had a great run. It's probably it now. They're probably not going to be able to put out kind of albums they used to put out in the 80s. Just the quality of albums didn't have to be like the albums in the 80s, but I just didn't think that they were still going to be able to put out the great albums that they'd probably done, up to Hell Dorado, quite a few albums, that would have been really, really good. even the ones in the early 90s, Still Not Black Enough, mid 90s, that was fantastic. I like KFD. I think that's really good. So, there's quite a lot of albums here. And then you got all the 80s ones. I don't know, 6 or 7 albums up to El Dorado. It had a great run of fantastic albums, but I thought, it's probably over now. This came out, I had low expectations, but it is a killer album. Let It Roar, Hate to Love Me, that's one of my favourite Wasp songs, fantastic. Locomotive Man, the first few songs in particular, really good, but it carries on from there. Just really good, solid album here from Wasp. Real return to form for me. And then it's just carried on since then. So, I don't expect a bad album, or my expectations are actually now fairly high since this one, and it's pretty much been met. There's been a few albums, I guess, that have been of lesser quality than others, but for the most part, they are still putting out fantastic albums. I think there's a new one coming out this year, hopefully. Of course, they're out. Wasp is out touring now as well, so it seems like they must be due for a new one. But so I'm looking forward to hopefully that coming out. But like I said, really nice surprise when this came out. Really good album. All right, so that's just some of the CDs I wanted to talk about. Now I've got some vinyl that was a bit of a surprise, surprisingly good. First one I'm going to show is all the way back in, I think this must be, 1984, something like that. 85 it is. And it's Michael Bolton, yeah. Everybody's Crazy. Now, it's a surprise because when I got this, I just knew Michael Bolton from, all his hit cities on the radio where he's, it's pretty light sort of stuff, isn't it, right? So I didn't expect it to be, this is very much like sort of Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet type sound, right? And of course, he's a great songwriter. The reason I picked this up is because I had heard that, his earlier albums, really good hard rock, so AOR. And, but yeah, I was just surprised at just how good it actually is. So it's I suppose I had expectations, or actually maybe this is going to be good because based on what I had read, but it certainly lived up to those expectations. But it's just a surprise when you think Michael Bolton doing, really good hard rock. This album rocks pretty hard at times. Everybody's Crazy is a good song, but Save Our Love, what a way to kick off the album. Actually every song almost. For me, it's one of those albums I can put the whole album on, play it right through, and there's no songs I really want to skip. So it's a funny one because a lot of people wouldn't know that this is the kind of album that it is, and would think, what's Michael Bolton doing in your collection? But hey, this is, if you like AOR hard rock, mid 80s hard rock, you got to have this. This is just fantastic. And people should know, even with the sort of softer stuff that he had success with, he can write hooks. He definitely knows how to write good songs. He's written for other artists, of course, as well, and had success there. This is awesome. Now, I also pulled out his first album, which I think is 83. This is also good as well, but this is the better one. But of course, after this album, he changed the sound a little bit. I think The Hunger was the next one. I do have it, but it's only got one song on it that sounds like this, and that's Gina. That's a good song. It sounds a little bit like a song from this album that would have come from this album, but then the rest of the songs are pretty lightweight. And of course, they had a bit of a hit, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, that cover song. That sort of was almost his first sort of solo hit. And then the one after that, I don't have his album after that one. Might be Soul Provider. I don't really know. I sort of didn't really follow Michael Bolton much after after the Hunger. But But anyway, check these out if you haven't. And if you're a hardcore metalhead, maybe not. Okay, it's hard rock AOR, but otherwise check it out. All right. So the ones I'm going to go through now, we're now getting sort of more. We're past the 80s. And so the surprise is really that, for sort of 90s, early 90s record that, it's and maybe with a band that maybe is out of favor, not so popular now, is actually still being able to put out a good album, or is still got a great sound going. Now, the first one I'm going to show is Winger, and this is the album Pool. Now, it is a bit of it was a bit of a surprise to me. So yeah, really surprisingly good. Because I didn't actually really like In the Heart of the Young that much. Can't Get Enough I thought was great, but then after that, and I've reviewed all their first three albums. Go back in one of my previous episodes, you'll see that. So yeah, and In the Heart of Young does have some goodish, a few good songs on it, but it just, yeah. I think the biggest surprise is it's 1993, and they have changed the sound a little bit. So you're thinking, oh yeah, okay, it's probably are they really going to be able to sort of still put out a good album? It's really fantastic. Lyrically, it's really good. Songs are fantastic. People now understand, I think, that this band is full of fantastic musicians. So, but I just wanted to mention this one. I think I do remember thinking, my expectations were low, and it delivered. It was really very surprisingly good album. So, of course, no one bought it. It was 1993, but still, again, one of those few bands in 1993. That's in that sort of hard rock, hair metal genre that was still on a major label and putting out an album, but they're on Atlantic. But this is it. This is after this album they sort of disappear for a while, as a lot of the bands like this had to. But of course, they're back and going really strong now with their new album out, and just found out a few days ago they are coming to Wellington. They are coming to where I live here in New Zealand. It's unbelievable, because I really didn't think I'd ever see Winger. They never toured here back in the day. They did visit New Zealand. Well, Kip Winger did visit New Zealand back in the, I think it was late 80s. He was on New Zealand TV just doing an interview, but he didn't play any concerts. But and he was only in New Zealand because his girlfriend at the time, Rachel Hunter, was lived in New Zealander. So yeah, he used to date Rachel Hunter, and so that was the only reason he was really in New Zealand. But he did a quick little interview on TV and things like that. But of course, Rachel then went off and hooked up with Rod. But and we know how that ended. But yeah, so there we go. But looking forward to the concert. I think they're going to be here in September. So that is pretty cool. So just fantastic too that Winger is like going all over the place, looking at their tour dates. So I think they've been over in the UK and Europe, and heading to Japan, Australia, and then they're coming over to visit little old Wellington. So it's very exciting. I'll definitely be checking that one out. And yeah, I'll be reporting on it on my channel, of course. All right, moving along. Another one. I think this is another one from '93. So yeah, 93, pretty sure this is Coverdale Page. Yeah, so expectations low again, just because, yeah, the year, but also, again, another band, maybe their previous album. Well, I say band, this is their first, of course, but I'm talking about Coverdale, David Coverdale. His previous album with Whitesnake, Slip of the Tongue, not that great. And Jimmy Page, he hasn't really done a lot, has he, in the 80s? So you weren't really expecting, I wasn't really expecting a lot. But I heard the singles, Shake My Tree, Take Me for a Little While, amazing songs, and they got a bit of airplay. They did a little bit of touring, but not much. Would have loved to have seen it, but the tour. But yeah, just this is again very solid album. The songs I mentioned are two of the standout songs. But again, in one of those albums I just put on, and it's like I'm quite happy to hear every single song on here. Just great rock. Yeah, really good. Just a great combination. Of course, Coverdale sounds fantastic, and Jimmy Page. Yeah, he can still play, and he proved it on this album. Really good. And David Coverdale again, but so what happened after that? So this is going to be another David Coverdale one. But what happened after that? There was no other Coverdale Page, and then David Coverdale, like a lot of artists in the 90s, I think he just got a little bit lost there and was sort of struggling to find his place. He did put out a Whitesnake album, but it was Restless Heart. It was Whitesnake featuring David Coverdale, which is a bit bizarre, really, because he is Whitesnake. It's a little bit like the Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi kind of deal. I think it's one of those things where he really was maybe thinking it was going to be a solo album, but needed to come out with Whitesnake in the title or something. I'm not sure. But that wasn't that great an album, I didn't think. Wasn't particularly heavy, didn't have that sort of real Whitesnake vibe from the 80s, the 80 type, late 80s kind of albums or mid 80s type albums. So when they talked about reforming, and I did hear a few tracks, that they had put together that went with a live album, they sounded okay, but really surprised when this one came out. This is Good to Be Bad, of course, which has just been reissued on vinyl. It's actually an original press. But really fantastic stuff. Just smoking some of the songs on here. Can You Hear the Wind Blows? What a great song, and All for Love. They're my two standout songs on this album. But I've always really enjoyed this album since it came out. And then the following albums after this, also really good. So, it's just carried it on from here. It's had a few different guitar players. The band changes a little bit, but the qualities remain the same. So, great stuff. So it was a surprise, and then after that, I'm less surprised because I've sort of my expectations now are sort of there, and they've delivered. So that's that one. Now this one here, this was a surprise because this is a band who made a bit of a comeback. This is in I think 2003. They made a bit of a comeback, and I was actually never. They had I think 3 albums I think in the 80s, and I've got them. But I was never really that big a fan. Yeah, I've got them in my collection, but wasn't a big fan. They had some hits, one in particular, but they had moderate success, but by their third album they were sort of fading away, and then they broke up. And the vocalist Steve Plunkett, he went off and did a solo album. Then he started sort of working as a songwriter, but then he decided to get Autograph back together. And this is the album Buzz, and it's my favorite Autograph album, quite easily my favorite. Like I said, not really that big a fan. Like I've got them because they're easy and cheap to pick up. I've got the other albums from the 80s, but not saying they're bad, but I don't like them as much as you would think I might like them. But this album, especially the first couple of tracks, Break a Sweat and not Shake My Tree, but Shake the Tree, really good. But production's really solid on this now. I don't know, it's got Steve Plunkett on vocals, but then I'm not too sure about the rest of the guys because they don't sound very familiar. They don't sound like Autograph guys. So it's slightly different to what's happening now, where it's Autograph, but they haven't even got haven't got Steve Plunkett even from the original lineup. But interesting, he decided to put the band back together, but he doesn't want to get back together with the band now. But and Dan from Off the Charts, I know that I've influenced him with buying some records. Well, he's responsible for this one. I didn't even know about this until I saw him show it, and then I streamed a little bit of it and thought, wow, that sounds really good. So I had to pick this up when I saw it because it was a vinyl reissue in 2020. So and it sounds great. It's really good. Of course, and so it was a surprise. But Steve Plunkett, as I said, he went off and did songwriting, and he's done a solo album. I know he's a good songwriter. I know he can write good songs, and he's definitely done that with this album. It's a surprisingly good one. Next one is the most recent album I'm going to show. This one just came out last year, didn't it? And this artist, for me, has been very consistent. So I always had pretty good expectations, and has been putting out albums for a long time. Been put out a lot of albums, and for me, they've always been good or excellent. No real duds for me. I know other people would possibly disagree, but no duds. But the album previous to this was starting to maybe sound a little tired, maybe not with the energy and the sort of the quality that I'd come to expect. So I hadn't picked that album up, and I don't think I still don't have it. I don't think. But this album by Ozzy Osbourne, Patient Number 9, was a fantastic comeback from that. I think previous album had 1 or 2 good songs, but really it just was really wasn't up to the usual standard that I for me anyway, from an Ozzy Osbourne album. But this one is it's fantastic, and it's interesting too because it's the same sort of production team. He does have a lot more. I think he does have a lot more special guests on this one. I don't know if that's made a big difference, but the songwriting, it's a bit heavier. It's just so much better. And yeah, another one of those albums where there's standout tracks, and of course I have done a album review of it as well, quite a while back. But when it came out, and of course I've been able to listen to it a lot more since then, and it's probably definitely as good as whatever I said about it when I did the review. Probably got it even a little bit better. It's one of those albums I put on, play from start to finish, and I'm pretty happy listening to the whole thing. There's no sort of tracks that I don't really want to listen to. But yeah, some better songs obviously than others. But Mr. Darkness has actually grown on me quite a bit. But yeah, the Patient Number 9, I think, was the first single. That's great. Parasite's a good kick-ass song. Yeah, so fantastic. I mean, if this ends up being Ozzy's last album, it's a great way to finish up. And the last one, that's a bit of a surprise. It's a surprise because, I love this artist in the 80s and early 90s. Well, actually, no, they weren't around in the early 90s. So just in the 80s, love this artist in the 80s, it's band. But then they split up, I think around 88, something like that. Then they got back together in the 90s, but they didn't have at times they had the original lineup, other times they didn't. And, anyway, the band I'm talking about is Dokken. So, and this is Lightning Strikes Again. Now, supposedly, this is when this came out. They said they were going to go back to their former sound, the sound that they sort of had in the 80s. And I was like, well, okay, maybe, but if you could do that, why don't you just do it all the time? Because that's the sound that was so successful for them, and that's the sound I think that they should have stuck with. But they did actually do that, and they did it really well. I mean, this does sound like Back for the Attack or something. A lot of the songs there, with still some maybe modern touches there, and it's not as good perhaps as Back for the Attack or Under Lock and Key, but it's pretty close. So it's a nice surprise for me. I mean, Give Me a Reason, Heart to Stone, Oasis, Standing on the Outside. Those are some of the standout tracks for me. I still really enjoy listening to this album. Lucky to have it on vinyl because it's not easy to get. I picked it up from Nuclear Blasters, on their website when it was available. The only thing that's a bit annoying about this album, this vinyl, is it's bigger than most vinyl normally is. If I just, it's going to be hard to see, but it's wider actually. So yeah, it's wider. You can see the difference, see the little extra width, and so it doesn't fit very nicely in with my other records. But that's not that important. But I'm just saying it's wide. I don't know why they did that. But anyway, so there we go, and that's my last one. So surprisingly good records or albums, that I've encountered that are in my collection. So I know I've in the past I did a while ago I did sort of disappointing albums, from artists I like, or bad albums from artists I like. So I thought let's do a positive one, So surprisingly good albums when I'm not expecting much. So hope you enjoyed that. Leave your comments. What are some albums that you weren't expecting much, or you were surprised at how good they actually were? Love to know. Maybe they're albums I haven't checked out, and because I thought they weren't going to be that good, and maybe they are. So let me know. Hit the thumbs up button if you would like to. Hit the subscribe button if you would like to. Great to see getting a few more subscribers. It's fantastic. More people checking out the channel. Got lots of cool things planned, and so keep watching. All right, we'll catch you later. See ya.